Hello, welcome back. Today we are going to be taking that deeper dive into this engine that I mentioned last time. So for that, we've got to first take out the coil packs. So let's get cracking. Now on each coil pack there is a connector which you've got to just pull out of place before you can remove the coil. But that is just a case of putting a little plastic clip and sliding it to the right. Same on both sides. Okay, so coil packs removed. Got all the coil packs out there, looking pretty good nick. But yeah, now just got to remove one of the spark plugs and get the endoscope and see what the inside of the bore looks like. With the first spark plug removed, we've got the endoscope here. As you can see, it's not a bad camera on this thing. But anyway, let's go in to the bore and see what we've got. Okay, so unfortunately I have to hold my phone over the endoscope because the endoscope doesn't have any native recording. So just looking around, quite the mirror sheen on the cylinder walls. We've got a little bit of oil there, but nothing too bad. Let's just rotate this around, see if we can see the other side. Yeah, oh. Yeah, can't really see any bore scoring. Everything looks pretty mirror shiny around the sides. Although what we really need is an endoscope that can do like a 90-degree view. Unfortunately, this has got a very straight on camera. However, saying that, yeah, I mean, I'm not seeing anything. Not seeing. That's just you can see how mirror shiny the cylinder walls are. Just reflecting that little dimple on top of the piston. I mean, yeah, the piston's a bit manky. It's been sat for a while, this engine, hence why we've got a little splodge of oil down the side there. But, yeah, I'm happy with that. I'll check the other 5 cylinders, make sure they look about the same, but as long as they don't look any worse, I'd say we're ready to go. So, first spark plug whipped out, NGK Iridium, part number ILF R6B. It's exactly what it should have in it, and the spark doesn't look too bad actually. It's a bit oily around the seal, but that's because the rocker cover gasket's on its way out, needs replacing. But I've already ordered another one anyway. And the tip doesn't look too bad, not too burnt, not too dark. I just think these have been in there a long time and the engine's been sat for a while. But anyway, I'll get another 6 of these on order. Okay, so in order to confirm this is a good engine, we're going to need to do a compression test on it. So I've got 2 compression testing tools here. I'll explain a little about those in a minute. But before we can use those, we've got to remove the coil packs and the spark plugs. So, as you can see, I've already gone ahead and removed all the coil packs. They are literally just held in with a single 12mm bolt. And then once you've done that, you can see the spark plugs in there, which you can just remove with the spark plug tool. Okay, at that point, we need to attach a device which will tell us how much compression is in each cylinder. Now, there's 2 ways of doing this. You can use a conventional compression tester, which is essentially just a gauge that you screw into the spark plug hole, and then as you turn the engine over, it tells you how much compression there is. The only problem with that is that the engine is not in the car, so I can't turn it over with the starter motor, because you need to turn over the engine to build the compression so that the gauge can take a reading. So I'm a bit stumped there. So instead, we're going to be using a slightly different tool. This is called a leak down tester. Similar thing, but the actual process is different. As you can see, this has got 2 gauges and it's got an airline attachment. So over there, I've actually got an air compressor, and you can see the line, which I'm going to connect to this. That then goes onto this, which goes into the spark plug tube. And essentially what we do is we fill the chamber with compressed air to 100 psi with the valves closed. You have to turn the engine to top dead center, one at a time on each cylinder, so that you got the valves closed so you can have compression. But yes, you fill this to 100 psi and then you use this gauge to see how much air is leaking away. Green's obviously good, red's bad. So let's go. First things first, let's take the spark plug attachment out of the box and need to remove a spark plug. Okay, so I've just removed the spark plug from cylinder 6. So I'm going to take the spark plug attachment And I'm basically going to put that back in where the spark plug was. It's got exactly the same thread, so I just turn it in. Doesn't have to be ever so tight, because at the end of the day you are just rotating a rubber tube here, but just need to seal it. So to make sure each cylinder is at top dead center for this test, I'm going to use this bore scope, and at the same time I can check the condition of the cylinder walls. So let's go in. As we can see, the piston's quite low down, so I'm going to use this 22mm socket on the crank pulley. I'm just going to turn over the engine until the valves are where they need to be. Okay, so as you can see, I've got the piston at top dead center. It won't go any higher than that, and now I can attach the air hose to do the leak down test. So I just take the attachment here and I insert that into the spark plug tube, and I just finger tighten that in. It's got exactly the same thread as the spark plug, so I've just got to keep going until it's in there pretty tight. Don't need to get any tools on this, you just do it finger tight. It's got a little rubber seal. Now when you're doing the test, you might have it at top dead center on the compression stroke, or you might have it at 180 degrees on the exhaust stroke. So the way to know is that if you connect up the system and you have no pressure whatsoever, you're on the exhaust stroke, so you've got to rotate the piston around again so that it goes all the way down and all the way back up. Okay, so I've connected up the airline, 100 PSI, and I basically rotate this knob. On some models of tester, you may have to pull it down. This is one of those actually. You have to pull it down to get it started. And you rotate the knob. And notice this isn't connected to the engine yet. You rotate the knob all the way until the needle stops. Now it should stop in the set mark, but unfortunately, because it's a bit of a cheap eBay tester, it's a little bit off. But what we do is we'll connect this now, and we'll see what reading we get. So with it connected, it's hardly moved at all, which is good, because green is good. The low mark means that this engine's got compression on this cylinder. You're supposed to do this test when the engine's hot, but of course with the engine out of the car, I can't do that, so I'm having to do it cold. But just to prove that the tester is working correctly, if I now rotate the engine, the valves will open and the pressure will quickly die away. So I'll do that now. So just listen for the change. You see? So that cylinder 6, is good. I've just got to repeat the same test on the other 5, and then I'll know that I've got good compression in all cylinders. Okay, so with all the cylinders now checked for compression, it's time to get that engine onto that stand. So I'm going to use my engine hoist there, and on the hook I've actually got a little weighing scale, so at the same time I can lift that up and find out exactly how much this engine weighs. Okay, so very quickly before we get it on the stand, that took a while to figure out the right combination of bolts, where to put them, and also had to space them out a little bit because the threads weren't the whole way along the shaft of the bolt. But yeah, happy with that. Before I put it on the stand, let's see how much this bad boy weighs. 153 kilos. That's not bad actually, considering that's also on there and that's about a kilo. So about 152 kilos. So it shouldn't really make much of a difference in the handling compared to the FA20 in the car when we remove it. So the engine is on the stand, and luckily it takes up a lot less space than that damn pallet that it came on. But now that we've got the engine kind of in this orientation, you can see something's definitely been leaking around here. It could just be the front crank seal, which I'm going to replace anyway, or it could actually be the seal around the front plate here. So this whole front plate is one piece to get to the cam belt. So I'm going to take that off anyway and inspect the cam belt and the tensioners in due course. So it's not really an issue. I guess it could have been leaking from power steering, but I don't know, that doesn't really look like power steering to me. That looks like engine oil. And then we've also got the alternator and the AC. Those wouldn't be leaking oil like that. So it's either a power steering leak or front seal leak or this front cover leak. But otherwise, yeah, it's good. It's on the stand. All the compression is checked. Compression's good on all 6 cylinders. And yeah, just move on to the next job now. Okay, so far so good. The next thing I want to do is actually take the cam covers off and check the cam lobes for any wear and tear, check the buckets that are on the other side of the valves that the cam lobes hit against, get a feeler gauge in there and check for the clearance to make sure it's all within spec. So first thing I need to do is take off the cam cover. This is pretty simple. This is the side that's got the PCV, so I just need to take some needle nose pliers, disconnect that hose, then all of the bolts around here are 10 mil. So let's get cracking. Okay, so all the bolts are out from the cam cover. Little tip, they're not all the same shape and size. So if I show you these here, you've got some long ones and some short ones. So the short ones came out the top left, the middle, and the bottom right on my engine. I don't know if it's the same for both sides or it's the same for all engines, but we'll find out when I do the other side. We can now see all of the cams, and you've got the lobes here which rotate down. They hit the shims, the buckets on the back of the valves, and that's what causes the valves to open and close, of course. And let's just have a close look here. Okay, so that one's got a little bit of a mark on the top of it, but it's not too bad. They look pretty good, actually. Not much wear at all. Yeah, I'm very happy with that. Those lobes look great. So it's now a case of getting a feeler gauge and inserting it down here between the lobes and the other side of the valves and just checking for the clearance. So I rotated the engine through 90 degrees. I've checked all the valve clearance with a feeler gauge. I won't take you through that process because it is very long. It is very boring. If you want to find out how to use a feeler gauge to check for valve clearance, lots of other people who probably do better videos about it on YouTube. So check those out. But for me, I've checked them all. They're all good. They're within tolerance. So I've just refitted the old cam cover gaskets for the moment. I'm not quite ready to fit the new ones yet. I actually want to do a couple more checks just to be 100% this engine's in good health, and then I can give it a good old clean before I commit to fitting the box full of new shiny seals and parts that I've got for it. So we'll just pop this back on for a second and we'll check the other side. Now, whatever you do, don't make the mistake that I made of trying to do the valve clearances and inspecting the lobes and taking off the cam covers and rotating the engine on the stand without first draining the sump. As you can see, I've just had to do a cleanup, which cost me 45 minutes. So always drain the sump before you're going to rotate the engine on the stand. That's such a schoolboy error, and I can kick myself for doing that. But of course, the engine in the present condition, there's no dipstick, the oil cap wasn't even on properly, and we've got the breather hoses for the crank ventilation system. So of course, there are 100 places for oil to leak out of. So now I've cleaned up all the oil that I spilt, I'm going to move on. I'm happy with the valve clearances, I'm happy with the cam lobes, everything on the timing system looks to be in spec, looks to be in good condition, so fantastic, I'm loving this engine. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to drop the oil and take the oil filter off and then change the filter. I'm not going to put a dirty oil filter back on, but what I want to do is look for anything in the oil that resembles little fragments of metal. And also I'm going to cut open the oil filter and also see if there's any metal in that. So let me get cracking. So I would recommend getting one of these things, which is an oil filter removal tool. This one has H901 stamped on it. I can't remember where I bought this from, in all honesty, but it is the right one for removing Toyota oil filters, and also it seems to be the right one for removing the Subaru oil filter on this EZ30. This makes life a lot easier. All you do, take a ratchet, put it on the end, and then just twist it off like one big giant nut. Job's a good one. Okay, so something I've just noticed, this oil cooler here, which has this hose that comes off, that's all bent. The pipework is all mangled and corroded. So that's all going to need replacing. I have no idea whether that is the result of the accident that this car was in hence why they broke the car and this engine was available to buy, or whether this is just careless removal of the engine at the scrappies. But either way, that needs to be replaced. I'm going to have to jump onto eBay, see if I can source a new one of those. Okay, with the oil filter cut open, couldn't find any metal in there, so fitted the new one. So far, so good. Everything checks out on this engine. The last thing I want to do is just remove the intake manifold and remove all of the injectors, because Ed's been busy cleaning the direct injectors on the Audi, and he's bought himself a special injector cleaning tool, so I want some of that. I'm going to take the injectors over to his and have them all cleaned up so that when they go back in this, they're as good as new and they're flowing the correct amount of fuel. But also, while I've got the intake off, I can give the inside of the intake a clean and also check the back of the intake valves for any signs that the valve stem seals need replacing. Basically, just give everything an inspection and a clean while I'm in there. So we start with a bit of wiring at the back, and then there are two 10mm bolts at the back which hold the intake manifold onto the fuel rail pipes. So I've already removed one. That's the second one out. And then I've already slackened off the 12s on the top of these covers. Okay, so now that cover should come off, hopefully. Yeah, there we go. So you've got 3 injectors on this side, same the other side, of course. So let me have a look. There are a couple of... There's a connector here. Let's undo that. Right, I'm going to snip these 2 cable ties here. And the loom is free. Okay, front 2 sensors disconnected. Okay, it looks like it's going to be easier to undo these with this out the way. So I'm just going to leave that cover off for the second. I'm going to get the other one undone. Okay, both cam covers are off. So let's get this intake manifold off. Oh. These have never been off. Okay, all 6 bolts out. Let's remove some of these other connectors. Here's the one for the throttle body. And there's one under the front here, which is for something else. Let's see, can I get my hand from the other side? Some vacuum hoses that need to come off. Again, these have probably never been off. Of course, this is all going to have to come off because before I fit all my shiny new gaskets and things, I'm going to want to give this engine a very deep clean. You can't do that with the intake manifold and the engine loom in place. So I'm now removing the EGR system. That is what this metal pipe is going up the back of the engine. For those who don't know, EGR is exhaust gas recirculation, and lots of modern engines have that because it helps with emissions. Now, because I'm not that bothered about emissions, I'm bothered about performance of this engine, I'm going to be removing it and it's going to go into the bin. There is one company that sells a blanking plate for the EGR system, but they are in America and their EGR kit costs about $15, but the postage is about $30. So I can't justify that out of principle, paying more in postage than the actual item's worth. So what I'm going to do is make my own EGR blanking plates. Or at least that's the plan. Oh, it's so close. It's almost off. What's holding it on? Right, there's a rubber fuel pipe here, and there's similarly a rubber fuel pipe over there. They're just held on with a little clamp with a Phillips head on it, so I'm going to get a Phillips head. Okay, so as these pipes have not been off like since the engine was new, I'm just going to lift up the rubber hoses a little bit and spray some WD-40 in between the rubber hose and the metal fuel rail. That will just help to lube it up and hopefully it will let the 2 sides let go of each other. Okay, it's off, but don't do what I've just done and pull too hard on this because I've now bent the end of the fuel rail. I need to buy a new fuel rail, amongst other things. Perfect. So we've got a connector under here. Let's pull that apart. And all that's holding the intake manifold on now is that other fuel hose, which I can hopefully get off without bending that fuel rail as well. Let's just cut these hoses. I don't want to risk ruining another fuel rail. We can always replace the hose. It's nothing special. It's just hose. Intake manifold is off. Okay, so the intake manifold is off. I've just flipped it over so I can show you how dirty the inside of these pipes will actually get. And this is just oil vapor being pumped around back into the intake manifold by the PCV system. And I'm almost certain that this is the cause of the little bit of oil that I was seeing inside the cylinders as I was turning the engine over earlier. So I'm not too concerned about it. But while I've got it off, I'm going to give the whole thing a very deep clean. The throttle body is absolutely disgusting, so I'm sure the back of that is properly caked up with oil. But anyway, let's turn our attention to the engine itself. Of course, now the intake manifold's off, I've got much easier access to removing the 3 injectors, so I can take them over to Ed's and clean them. But let's just take a look at the valves. Very nice, actually. Surprisingly clean. Yeah. Wow. Impressed. I didn't think they'd be that clean, to be honest. I mean, this side got a bit of oil, obviously, around the sides, but the valves themselves are very nice and clean. Now, for those who probably know a bit more about engines than I do, let me know in the comments if you think there's any signs there of the stem seals needing to be replaced, because when your valve stem seals wear out, you start to let oil past the valves and into the intake, and then it gets burnt up. And that's why a lot of old Japanese cars like Supras and Skylines, when they've got high mileage and they get on a bit, they do puff some blue smoke when they first start up. So I think the valve stem seals are probably going to be okay. I could do a more thorough strip down and actually inspect them and change them. But from what I've seen looking at the back of the valves through the intake ports here, I don't see any evidence to suggest they're worn out or they're tired. So I think it's worth the risk of just moving on past them and worrying about it later, to be honest. But yes, this needs a thoroughly good clean. So I'm going to have to revisit this in the future. I'm going to have to cover all of these intake holes up, and I'm going to have to get a lot of degreaser and a toothbrush, and I'm going to have to give this a damn good scrub down. I'm going to have to remove all of this wiring loom so that that doesn't get wet. And then, of course, on the intake manifold, I need to give that a good clean. But once that's clean, once that is clean, and once Ed has cleaned my injectors for me, I can put it all back together and I can start fitting all the new seals and everything. Yeah, fantastic. Right, now with the intake manifold out of the way, these should just unclip. Yep, there's one, there's two, there's three. Okay, this is unfortunately the fuel rail that I broke. So how is this held on? There's two 12mm bolts. Okay, and there are my injectors, complete with the little injector seals on them. You can see what I've... Oh, there's some fuel in it. You can see where I've just pinched it there. So that's a shame. I'm going to have to replace this whole rail. But I can now just pop out the injectors, hopefully, and I can take those over to Ed's, and I can use his machine to clean those. So that's probably the best place to end the video, I think. Now that we've just got the injectors and the fuel rails off ready for cleaning, I'm going to have to get some old socks and just bung those down the intake pipes just to make sure that over Christmas nothing falls in there. Because it's going to take me a little bit of time to get everything ready to rebuild this, to clean the intake manifold, to get rid of all the crud off the top of this. But the future's bright. 2024 will be putting this all back together, making it all shiny, ready to go into a BRZ. Which brings me to the next stage of the project, really, is to be buying myself a BRZ. I need to get onto the Auto Trader and the eBay, see what I can find out there in the market. But thank you so far for watching the videos. I'm hoping you're enjoying this step-by-step process on the project. And there's probably not going to be another EZ30 video this year. We're almost at Christmas and New Year, so probably the next one will be 2024. But maybe Ed will have a video for you before the end of the year. He's been squirreling away on the Audi, so we might get something from him. But I've got some videos lined up to drop over Christmas. Early this year, me and Alan went to visit the Silent Third member of LeEdFollow, Dave, who does all of our music, and we did a little bit of a road trip kind of video, and I'm hopefully going to get that all finally edited together and ready to share with you over Christmas, so you can look forward to that. But yes, thanks again. Take care of yourselves. Happy New Year, and we'll see you next year. Take care. Bye-bye.